Settle into the quiet for a moment and listen for water. In a modern house, it may be moving behind plaster, waiting in a tank, resting in a trap, or passing beneath the street. A touch of a lever can make bodily waste disappear so quickly that the act seems almost self-contained. Yet nothing has truly vanished. What leaves the room enters a longer route through pipes, pits, pumps, tanks, treatment works, soil, rivers, and seas. Along that route stand maintenance crews, laboratory workers, drivers, engineers, cleaners, regulators, and households. The familiar ceramic bowl is only the visible doorway to an immense and often hidden system. What leaves what? It concerns the ways human communities have contained excreta, moved it, reused it, treated it, or released it. It also concerns who performed the unpleasant work, who could obtain privacy, and who lived beside the destination. A fine seat above a neglected cesspit did not create safe sanitation. A sewer that carried contamination to a poorer settlement merely shifted the danger. Conversely, a simple pit or dry toilet could serve people safely when it was correctly placed, maintained, emptied, and managed. The complete chain matters more than the elegance of any single object. There is no tidy march from universal filth toward modern cleanliness. Techniques appeared, disappeared, and returned in altered forms. Dense ancient cities sometimes built impressive drains, while later communities chose systems requiring less water. Farmers valued human waste as fertilizer, even when handling it exposed them to disease. 19th century sewers transformed urban life, yet many initially discharged untreated sewage farther downstream. Present-day treatment plants protect millions of people, while floods, power failures, broken mains, or unaffordable fees can quickly reveal their fragility. This story moves forward through time, but it does not place every society on one ladder. Archaeology must be approached gently. A stone channel may have carried rain, bath water, urine, or several flows at different moments. A surviving seat may represent a palace rather than an ordinary home. Wooden screens, reed mats, lids, cleaning cloths, and rules of daily behavior usually decay. Even parasite eggs and chemical residues tell only part of what happened. Written laws show what authorities desired, not necessarily what residents did. Throughout this journey, the evidence will sometimes allow a firm statement and sometimes only a careful possibility. Long before permanent streets, small mobile groups still had to separate living space from excreta. Distance was often the most available technology. People could choose a place beyond sleeping areas, food stores, and water sources, then cover waste with soil, ash, or plant matter. Mobility prevented long accumulation, although repeated seasonal use of a favorite camp could leave concentrated deposits. In caves and protected shelters, coprolites, mineral signatures, and parasite remains occasionally survive. These finds can reveal diet and infection, but they rarely preserve the custom that directed a person where to go. The effectiveness of early practices varied with landscape. Loose, dry soil absorbed material differently from saturated ground. Rain could wash a shallow deposit toward a stream. Frozen earth made burial difficult, and a crowded camp offered less distance than an open plain. Dogs, pigs, insects, and grazing animals could move contamination. The biological advantage of separating feces from food did not require knowledge of bacteria. People could learn through smell, experience, custom, religious practice, and observation, even when their explanations of illness differed from modern microbiology. Permanent settlement altered the scale of the problem. A village that occupied the same ground year after year generated refuse faster than nature dispersed it. Buildings created corners, courtyards, lanes, and shared boundaries. Wells and springs drew many households to one water source. A decision made by one family could affect its neighbors. Pits had to be relocated or emptied, surfaces repaired, and dumping places negotiated. The first sanitation infrastructure was as much a set of social agreements as a collection of constructed features. At early sites such as Jericho, which developed through many phases beginning in the early Holocene, archaeologists find dense building, plastered surfaces, and changing arrangements for water and waste. It would be misleading to call these remains a modern sewer system. Channels might have served storm drainage or household liquids, while solid excreta could have been handled separately. The important change was coordination. When houses gathered closely around a spring, keeping pathways and water usable required repeated communal attention. The labor left fewer traces than walls, although without it, the settlement would not have functioned. In southern Mesopotamia, urban growth brought new combinations of brickwork, vertical shafts, clay pipes, cesspits, and street drainage. By the 3rd millennium BCE, selected houses in cities such as Ur and Nippur included rooms interpreted as lavatories. Some had sloped surfaces or drains leading into pits lined with pottery rings or baked brick. These installations suggest practical knowledge of gradients, absorbent ground, and durable materials. They do not demonstrate equal provision across the population, nor do they tell us precisely how often each room was used. A Mesopotamian household pit held waste close to the building rather than carrying it to a distant treatment site. Liquids could seep into surrounding soil while solids accumulated. That reduced the burden of daily transport, but the pit had a finite capacity and could threaten groundwater if badly located. Builders needed to prevent walls from collapsing. Servants or specialist workers might clear deposits, yet their identities are faint in the surviving record. The durable pipe receives attention in museums. The person who cleaned beneath it generally does not. Mesopotamian cities also constructed drains for rainfall and wastewater. Baked bricks and bitumen could make channels more resistant to erosion. Some drains ran along streets where sediment and debris would have required removal. It is easy to imagine all these features joined into one comprehensive network. But excavated sections belong to different dates and functions. One quarter could enjoy a carefully built outlet while another relied on a courtyard pit. Urban sanitation was layered, local, and unequal. Written records from the ancient Near East add glimpses of responsibility, rent, building, and nuisance, though they seldom provide a complete household manual. Laws and contracts show that property boundaries mattered when water or waste crossed them. Administrative capacity could mobilize work on canals, walls, and streets. But maintenance still depended on routine acts. Even the strongest brick channel failed if silt blocked its gradient. This is a recurring lesson. The celebrated moment of construction is brief, whereas upkeep continues every day. Farther east, the cities of the Indus civilization offer some of the most visually striking evidence for ancient drainage. At Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and related settlements of the 3rd millennium BCE, many buildings had bathing platforms made from carefully fitted brick. Small drains passed through walls into covered channels along streets. Inspection openings and soak vessels appear in several excavated areas. Wells supplied water at a scale that made washing and drainage prominent parts of urban life. These remains deserve admiration without the label of a fully modern sanitation system. A drain is a path, not a treatment process. Street channels could convey bathwater, rain, and other household liquids, but their exact contents varied. Soak jars trapped solids or allowed water to infiltrate. Large sewers as understood today were not the universal endpoint. Archaeologists also debate the function of particular rooms and chutes. The Indus script remains undeciphered, leaving no equivalent of a municipal operations handbook. What the masonry clearly reveals is attention to flow. Brick courses were laid to preserve a slope, covers allowed access, and outlets were positioned in relation to streets. Such arrangements demanded cooperation among householders, builders, and people who removed obstructions. Monsoon rainfall, dust, broken pottery, and domestic refuse would have tested every channel. The ordered plan visible to an excavator was sustained, in its own time, by work repeated after storms and during ordinary cleaning. Mohenjo-Daro also warns against confusing prominent architecture with complete access. Excavation exposes a sample shaped by preservation and research history. House size varied. A private well or bathing room indicated resources that not every resident possessed. Shared facilities may leave less obvious evidence than monumental structures. Furthermore, a cleaner interior could send dirty water into public space. The urban achievement lay in coordination, yet its benefits and burdens cannot be assumed to have been evenly divided. In ancient Egypt, toilet furniture survives mainly from wealthier settings. A wooden or stone seat could be placed above a removable vessel filled with sand or another absorbent material. Pottery containers served ordinary bodily needs, and workers housed near major projects used simpler pits or designated places. The dry climate preserved objects that would have vanished elsewhere, but even in Egypt the record favors elite tombs and institutional settlements. It is safer to speak of several practices than of one Egyptian toilet. Portable containment offered flexibility. A vessel did not require a pressurized water supply or permanent drain. It could be used in a private room and carried away. That convenience rested on someone else's hands. Servants emptied and cleaned containers, while waste might be buried, dumped, dried, or used on land depending on location and custom. The elegant seat concealed labor as effectively as porcelain later would. Social rank determined who sat in privacy and who managed what remained. Egyptian settlements also used drains in palaces, temples, workshops, and planned communities, although water was too valuable for indiscriminate flushing. Desert conditions encouraged dry handling, while the Nile Valley created its own relationships among floodwater, agriculture, and refuse. We should resist imagining a single network spread across the kingdom. A royal residence, a quarry camp, and a farming village faced different soils, densities, and resources. Each arranged bodily waste within its local ecology. Across the eastern Mediterranean, Bronze Age sites on Crete and nearby islands contained stone channels, settling basins, cisterns, and rooms sometimes identified as toilets. At Knossos, a famous installation has been described as a flushing latrine because water could pass through a channel beneath a seat. The interpretation is plausible, but reconstructions should not be treated as an eyewitness account. Water may have been poured or released only at intervals, and access was concentrated within a palace complex. These Aegean arrangements demonstrate sophisticated control of gravity. Cisterns stored rainfall, terracotta pipes conducted water, and channels drained selected rooms. Yet a technically accomplished palace did not define the daily experience of the surrounding population. Most people continued to rely on vessels, pits, outdoor places, and manual removal. Technologies coexisted. Monumental plumbing represented one branch of a much larger landscape of sanitation. Ancient China provides another long and varied record. Archaeologists have identified latrine pits, ceramic conduits, toilet rooms, and residues from settlements spanning many dynasties. A recently publicized flush-style toilet assembly from the ruins of a palace at Yueyang, associated with the Qin and early Han periods, included broken ceramic components and a bent pipe. Its excavators proposed that water was poured manually. The find is intriguing, but it does not establish a single inventor or widespread household adoption. More common were pits placed at the edge of a compound, sometimes associated with pig enclosures. The well-known image of a pig toilet, in which excreta entered a sty, appears in archaeological models and later descriptions. Though form and use differed by region, pigs could consume some organic matter, while manure and human waste contributed nutrients to agriculture. Such recycling reduced the idea of excreta as useless rubbish. It also created routes for parasites when handling and treatment were unsafe. Chinese medical and archaeological evidence shows why a celebratory account of reuse must remain cautious. Parasite eggs recovered from latrines and mummified remains point to infections transmitted through contaminated soil, food, and water. Fertilizer had value, but value encouraged collection before pathogens were understood. Storage, composting, dilution, crop choice, and time could reduce some risks. The practices were inconsistent. The same material could sustain soil fertility and carry disease. Urban governments in successive Chinese states regulated streets, canals, markets, and household conduct in different ways. Night soil became part of commercial systems, especially where intensive farming surrounded large cities. Contractors might pay for the right to collect it because farmers wanted nutrients. This reversed the modern assumption that a city must pay merely to discard waste. The price, however, depended on transport distance, agricultural demand, and the cost of labor. A nutrient economy could thrive without ensuring dignity or safety for collectors. In the Greek world, chamber pots and outdoor practices remained ordinary, even where public facilities existed. From the Hellenistic period, communal latrines appeared in some cities and sanctuaries. Rows of seats could be arranged over a channel, using flowing water to carry waste away. A separate shallow gutter may have supplied water for washing implements. Archaeological reconstruction provides the physical layout, but it cannot tell us whether every visitor felt comfortable or whether customs were identical across centuries. Privacy in these rooms differed from modern expectations. Seats often stood side by side without partitions. Conversation may have occurred, yet public latrines should not be romanticized as relaxed social clubs for everyone. Status, gender, enslavement, age, and local conventions shaped access. Many people still used pots at home, and slaves or servants carried the contents. Public architecture redistributed the task rather than eliminating it. Greek cities managed fountains, drains, and streets through civic institutions, but no uniform system covered the entire Mediterranean. In Athens, for example, drains evolved over centuries and served rainfall as well as wastewater. Regulations against dumping reflected recurring conflict. The existence of a rule suggests a problem, not perfect compliance. Water was precious, and the constant flushing familiar in later soured cities would have been impractical in many places. Rome expanded several of these arrangements on an exceptional scale. Aqueducts delivered large volumes of water to fountains, baths, imperial establishments, and some private houses. Drains and sewers removed rainwater and wastewater from selected districts. Public or semi-public latrines, often built near baths and busy streets, placed stone or marble seats over channels. The infrastructure was impressive, but its operation relied on abundant water, state finance, skilled construction, and labor that ranged from respected technical work to coerced cleaning. The cloaca maxima began as part of the drainage of low ground in Rome, probably developing from open channels that were later covered and rebuilt. Tradition linked it to early kings, while the surviving masonry belongs to multiple periods. It carried storm water and other discharges toward the Tiber. Calling it a modern sanitary sewer obscures both its original drainage role and the fact that it did not treat what entered. The river became the receiver. Connections from private buildings to sewers were not universal. Many Romans used chamber pots and cesspits. Urine had economic uses in textile processing and laundering, and collection vessels could feed that trade. Fullers used alkaline substances during cloth treatment. Later literary references to a tax on urine under Emperor Vespasian reveal its taxable value. The famous remark that money does not smell belongs to a later retelling, but the underlying fiscal measure illustrates how waste could become a commodity. Roman latrines exposed users in ways that marble ruins do not immediately show. Shared sponges mounted on sticks are often presented as universal wiping tools, yet the evidence is limited and interpretation debated. Water channels may have supported washing, but users also brought materials that rarely survive. Rodents and insects could enter. Odors moved through drains if water seals were absent. A seat above flowing water offered removal, not sterilization. Research on ancient parasites complicates the notion that aqueducts, baths, and toilets automatically improved population health. Studies have found evidence of whipworm, roundworm, and other intestinal parasites across Roman sites. Fish tapeworm may have spread through foods such as fermented fish products when preparation failed to kill parasites. Public bathing and agricultural reuse could provide additional transmission routes. These findings do not make Roman engineering pointless. They show that one barrier cannot control every pathway. The empire's enormous range also prevents a single Roman model. A fort near Hadrian's Wall, a North African port, a villa in Sicily, and a crowded apartment district in the capital encountered different climates and supplies. Military latrines could be carefully planned, while informal neighborhoods depended on containers and street collection. Elite authors complained about throne refuse, but sensational anecdotes cannot stand for daily practice everywhere. The safest conclusion is diversity, joined by unequal access. As evening settles over the ancient city, imagine the sounds below the architecture: water falling into a fountain basin, a pot being carried down a stair, a channel cleared after rain, a cart taking material beyond the walls. None of these actions ended the cycle. Waste entered a river, a pit, a field, or another person's working day. The early history of toilets is already a history of connected lives, even before the word sanitation acquired its modern meaning. The political changes of late antiquity did not cause every pipe to stop at once. Networks aged at different rates. In some cities, administrators repaired aqueducts and drains. Elsewhere, residents adapted broken monumental systems to smaller needs. A bath complex might close while a neighborhood fountain continued to flow. Stone seats could be reused as building material, and former sewers could become blocked, narrowed, or redirected. The transition was not a single fall from Roman cleanliness into medieval dirt, but a long rearrangement of population, finance, authority, and water use. Constantinople, later known as Istanbul, inherited Roman engineering traditions while developing its own water landscape. Aqueducts carried water from distant sources. Great cisterns stored supplies, and drains served palaces, baths, monasteries, and ordinary districts in unequal measure. The enormous covered basilica cistern, completed in the 6th century under Justinian, supplied water rather than treating sewage. Its modern fame can blur the distinction between water storage and sanitation. Still, a dependable supply made washing and some forms of drainage easier in the imperial capital. Byzantine towns used latrines in houses, religious institutions, and public buildings, along with cesspits and vessels. Monasteries sometimes placed communal toilet rooms over channels or at the edge of compounds. Maintenance records are fragmentary, but repairs to waterworks appear throughout the period. War, earthquakes, sediment, and political disruption damaged systems, while local expertise restored selected sections. Continuity survived through practical knowledge even when centralized spending weakened. Across the expanding Islamic world from the 7th century onward, Bodily cleanliness had religious as well as practical dimensions. Islamic jurisprudence addressed purification after urination and defecation, the use of water or clean materials, direction, privacy, and avoidance of contaminating shared resources. These prescriptions were interpreted within varied legal schools and local environments. They did not produce one standardized toilet, yet they encouraged careful attention to washing and separation. Water was not equally abundant from Cordoba to Cairo, Damascus, Baghdad, Fez, or Central Asia. Houses could contain latrine shafts leading to pits, while public buildings and palaces used drains. Hammams supplied spaces for bathing. Although a bathhouse was not a toilet and its wastewater posed separate management problems. Mosques required facilities for ritual ablution, which increased the need for reliable supply and drainage. Charitable endowments, known as awqaf in the plural, sometimes supported fountains, bathhouses, and water infrastructure. The exact responsibilities varied by city and document. In many Islamic cities, cesspits under or near houses held fecal matter, while liquid wastewater entered lanes or drains. Soil conditions affected whether pits absorbed moisture. Imtias worked at night or during less busy hours, carrying material beyond dense quarters. Municipal oversight could involve market inspectors and neighborhood authorities, yet formal rules did not guarantee clean streets. As elsewhere, wealth purchased more private space and more frequent service. Medieval Arabic medical writers discussed air, water, diet, and the environment through theories inherited and transformed from Greek, Persian, Indian, and local traditions. Unpleasant odors were associated with corruption and illness, though bacteria remained unknown. Some measures inspired by miasmatic thinking, such as removing decomposing matter from living areas, could reduce exposure even when the causal explanation was incomplete. Other measures focused on smell while leaving fecal contamination in water untouched. Practical success and theoretical accuracy did not always travel together. In Christian Europe, monasteries offer unusually detailed archaeological evidence because communities built durable complexes and preserved plans. The idealized 9th century plan of Senegal shows latrine arrangements as part of an ordered monastery, though the drawing was a design rather than proof that every house followed it. At sites such as Canterbury, Durham, and Fountains Abbey, channels, watercourses, and communal red orders demonstrate sustained planning. A rear daughter usually stood behind the dormitory, allowing monks to reach a row of seats without crossing the outdoor precinct at night. Water beneath some monastic red or precinct at night. Water beneath some monastic red orders carried material away, while other houses relied on pits. The location downstream from a clean water intake mattered. Mill ponds, kitchens, infirmaries, and gardens competed for flow. A channel that removed waste effectively from the cloister could pollute land or water outside the walls. Monastic discipline assigned cleaning and maintenance, but spiritual organization did not suspend hydraulics. Sediment still accumulated, timbers decayed, and low flow allowed deposits to remain. Castles used garderobes, built into walls or towers. A stone seat opened through a vertical chute, letting excreta fall into a pit, moat, or external space. The word garderobe later became associated with clothing storage. But its meanings changed, and the popular idea that garments were always hung near a latrine to deter moths should be treated cautiously. Some chutes were exposed to air. Others became encrusted and required clearing. During a siege, their openings could even become security vulnerabilities. Town houses often had privies over cesspits and yards. London, York, Lubeck, Bruges, and many other medieval cities have yielded pits rich in seeds, bones, pottery, leather, insects, and parasite eggs. To archaeologists, a cesspit can be an extraordinary archive of diet and daily life. To its users, it was a container that eventually filled. Property owners hired workers called rakers, gong farmers, or by other local names to empty it. Terminology shifted across languages and centuries, but the occupation consistently involved danger, odor, and low status. Night work reduced conflict with daytime traffic and spared customers some embarrassment. A crew might loosen compacted contents with long tools, fill tubs or barrels, and carry loads to a cart. Material could go to fields, dumping grounds, or waterways. Accidents in poorly ventilated pits could be fatal because decomposing waste releases gases including hydrogen sulfide and methane. Medieval workers did not use those chemical names, yet they recognized that certain confined places could overcome a person. Urban ordinances reveal attempts to manage shared space. English and Scandinavian towns fined residents for obstructing gutters or failing to remove refuse. Italian and German cities issued comparable rules. Historians caution that the old image of every medieval resident casually throwing chamber pot contents from an upper window is exaggerated. Such acts occurred, and complaints describe them. But regular street cleaning, designated dumps, household responsibility, and hired removal also existed. The repeated law demonstrates negotiation, not universal lawlessness. Gutters usually carried rain and household liquids, rather than forming enclosed sanitary sewers. Butchers, tanners, brewers, dyers, markets, stables, and homes contributed different wastes. Separating human excreta from industrial and animal refuse was not always practical. Rivers offered transport and dilution, which made them attractive outlets while endangering downstream users. Watercourses were simultaneously sources, drains, boundaries, fisheries, and working routes. Conflicts followed because one person's convenient disposal spoiled another person's intake. Privacy varied sharply. A prosperous home might have a screened privy, while tenants shared one pit at the back of a crowded plot. Travelers at inns used chamber pots, outdoor structures, or communal seats. Illness and disability could make a distant yard inaccessible. Women managing menstruation needed water, cloths, and places to wash, concerns seldom described in official accounts. The boot record captures a hole in a wall more readily than fear, embarrassment, pain, or waiting. The evidence from Africa south of the Sahara is especially vulnerable to old colonial assumptions. Earthen architecture, seasonal rebuilding, and limited excavation once encouraged outsiders to mistake an uneven archive for an absence of urban management. A Great Zimbabwe, occupied most intensively between roughly the 11th and 15th centuries, stone enclosures stand within a wider landscape of earthen houses, paths, water sources, middens, and activity areas. Archaeologists have examined drainage and waste deposits, but there is no basis for imposing a single European-style sewer model on the site. Great Zimbabwe's residents managed a large settlement through spatial separation, cleaning, and the properties of local soil and terrain. Rainfall moved rapidly across granite slopes, making erosion and drainage significant. Domestic routines inside Daga structures left subtler traces than monumental dry stone walls. Sanitation history here must begin by admitting what excavation cannot recover. The absence of a ceramic flush fixture says nothing useful about the intelligence or order of the community. Along the East African coast, Swahili towns such as Kilwa Kisiwani, Gedi, and Shanga combined coral stone houses, courtyards, wells, drains, and pits. From the medieval period onward, these ports participated in Indian Ocean trade while maintaining distinct local cultures. Some stone houses included latrine spaces with shafts or drains. Access to wells and the permeability of coral geology shaped design. As in other cities, elite architecture is more visible than the sanitation of residents in less durable housing. Islamic practices of washing influenced domestic arrangements in many Swahili communities, but water had to be drawn and carried. A toilet with a washing niche represented labor before and after use. Wells risked contamination if pits were poorly placed in porous ground. Monsoon rains could flood low areas. Imported ceramics found in refuse deposits attract attention, yet humble ash, soil, and organic matter often perform the everyday work of containment. In the pre-Columbian Americas, civilizations developed sanitation within environments ranging from tropical lowlands to high mountains. Maya cities invested heavily in reservoirs, plastered surfaces, channels, and water management. At Tikal, Palenque, and other sites, drains controlled rainfall and served palace or residential complexes. Some structures have been interpreted as latrines based on form or chemical evidence, but researchers distinguish carefully between toilets, drains, and water control features. Dense Maya centers faced a seasonal problem. Intense rainfall alternated with dry months. Reservoirs needed protection from eroded soil and human contamination. Household waste could be placed in middens where organic material decomposed and useful objects were recovered. Caves and pits preserve coprolites and parasite evidence at some locations. The record shows skilled manipulation of water without implying that every neighborhood enjoyed the same protection. Tenochtitlan, founded in the 14th century on islands in Lake Texcoco, supported a large population through canals, aqueducts, causeways, markets, and intensive agriculture. Spanish eyewitnesses described canoes collecting excreta and refuse for use on fields, though their accounts carried both admiration and political bias. Human waste had fertilizer value in the Chinampa landscape. Public cleanliness was reportedly regulated, yet conquest-era descriptions cannot be accepted uncritically as precise municipal statistics. The city's island setting made freshwater separation crucial. Aqueducts brought water from springs on the mainland, and residents also relied on vendors. Salt and brackish lake water surrounded the settlement. Dikes and canals managed levels and salinity. Toilets and waste collection belonged to this engineered waterscape, but the catastrophic violence, epidemics, and rebuilding after 1521 transformed it. Colonial Mexico City later struggled with flooding and drainage on the same basin, using different institutions and priorities. In the Andes, steep terrain and limited level ground encouraged channels, terraces, and carefully placed drainage. Inca and earlier sites, such as Machu Picchu, contain fountains and stone conduits that manage spring water and heavy rain. Some small rooms or openings have been called toilets, though interpretations vary. Gravity could carry wastewater away from selected compounds, while ordinary households used simpler facilities. At high altitude, cold nights, thin soils, and seasonal rainfall altered decomposition and handling. The Americas thus repeat no single pattern. Aztec recovery of nutrients, Maya reservoir protection, Andean drainage addressed distinct settings. After European conquest, imposed settlement, forced labor, livestock, new property regimes, and demographic collapse changed old systems. Colonial authorities often described indigenous practices through a language of superiority or depending on indigenous workers and knowledge. Sanitation became one more arena in which power shaped whose methods were recognized. In Japan, urban night soil markets became particularly organized during the Edo period, from the early 17th to the mid-19th century. Edo, Osaka, and Kyoto produced concentrated human waste, while nearby farmers needed fertilizer for intensive cultivation. Landlords, collectors, brokers, and cultivators negotiated rights and prices. In some districts, the contents of wealthy households commanded more value, because diet was thought to improve fertilizer quality, a revealing mixture of material observation and social hierarchy. Collection usually involved buckets beneath privies. Workers transferred the contents into lidded tubs and carried or carted them out of town. Boats could move loads along canals. Farmers stored or treated the material before applying it, but methods varied and did not reliably eliminate pathogens. The city gained regular removal without building vast waterborne sewers, and agriculture received nutrients. Collectors still faced direct exposure, spills, and stigma. Because waste had a price, disputes arose over ownership. A tenant produced it, a landlord controlled the privy. A collector bought access, and a farmer purchased the result. Contracts could make the chain predictable. Economic value encouraged routine emptying. Yet market logic also meant that shifts in fertilizer prices affected service. When chemical fertilizers became more available and urban conditions changed during the modern era, the old balance weakened. Korea likewise linked latrines with farming, although practices differed by period and place. Joseon-era households used pits, jars, ash, and collected manure in agricultural cycles. Urban growth in Seoul created larger flows requiring transport. Historical documents discuss cleanliness and neighborhood order, but low-status laborers remain less visible than officials. The comparison with Japan is useful only when it preserves difference. Neither society followed one timeless East Asian system. Early modern European courts illustrate another form of inequality. The close stool was a chair containing a chamber pot beneath a hinged seat. Upholstery, fine wood, metal fittings, and curtains turned a basic container into furniture suited to a royal chamber. The groom of the stool in Tudor England acquired political intimacy because serving the monarch's private body meant privileged access, though the office evolved and was not simply a toilet cleaning post. Lesser servants carried, emptied, washed, and supplied the vessel. Palaces could be crowded and foul despite their luxury. The Sai is often described through dramatic stories of courtiers relieving themselves wherever they pleased. Some accounts are embellished, yet the palace certainly depended on chamber pots, stools, cesspits, and staff because fixed facilities did not match its population during major gatherings. Odors, overflowing containers, and inadequate privacy coexisted with mirrors, fountains, and ceremonial splendor. Magnificent water displays outside did not automatically produce adequate indoor sanitation. In 1596, Sir John Harington published a satirical work describing a flushing closet he called Ajax. A cistern released water into a bowl, sending contents toward a cesspit. He installed a version for himself, and reportedly one for Queen Elizabeth I. His design deserves a place in the story, but not the title inventor of the modern toilet. Similar principles had appeared elsewhere, and Harrington's device did not spread widely. It required water, construction, and a safe outlet that most buildings lacked. The publication is valuable because it describes both mechanism and nuisance. Harington considered water quantity, odor, and the need to keep the receiving vault in order. The word Ajax played in the contemporary term jakes for a privy, reminding us that technical history was embedded in humor and embarrassment. His courtly invention remained exceptional because an isolated flush could simply overwhelm a nearby pit. During the 17th and 18th centuries, inventors and tradespeople experimented with valves, pans, traps, and seals. Their goal was not only removal but control of smell. A pipe connecting a room to a cesspool or sewer created a path for foul air unless water or a mechanical valve blocked it. The problem became more urgent as toilets moved inside prosperous homes. Comfort depended on a small barrier that users rarely saw. Alexander Cumming patented an S-shaped water trap in Britain in 1775. The bend retained water after each flush, forming a seal against gases. In 1778, Joseph Bramah patented a valve closet in which a hinged flap controlled the outlet. His design worked more reliably in cold conditions and aboard ships. Neither patent instantaneously transformed housing, manufacturing, installation skill, water supply, drains, cost, and user trust determined adoption. Early water closets could leak, freeze, block, or wastewater. Pan closets used a basin that tipped its contents, but fouling accumulated in concealed parts. Valve closets offered improvement at a higher price. Cesspools received larger volumes than before, requiring more frequent emptying. In cities without adequate sewers, fashionable plumbing accelerated the movement of contamination into ground and waterways. A better room could produce a worse neighborhood environment. Potters and sanitary manufacturers gradually made bowls smoother and easier to clean. Glazed earthenware, improved firing, standardized fittings, and mass production lowered costs during the 19th century. Designs such as the washout, washdown, and siphonic closet competed. Advertising connected white ceramic surfaces with respectability and moral order. The shining bowl became a symbol of modern domestic life, although its whiteness said nothing about treatment beyond the wall. The terminology also settled unevenly. Water closet became WC, while lavatory, privy, necessary house, latrine, bathroom, toilet, and many regional expressions overlapped. In the United States, bathroom and restroom softened direct reference to bodily functions. In Britain, public conveniences offered another euphemism. Language created social distance from waste, just as plumbing created physical distance. The worker at the far end could not rely on either kind of concealment. Industrial urbanization made every weakness in the chain larger. During the late 18th and 19th centuries, towns across Europe and North America grew faster than housing and municipal services. Families crowded into subdivided rooms and back-to-back houses. A yard privy designed for a few users might serve dozens. Ash, food scraps, and excreta entered the same midden. When a cesspool filled, owners delayed emptying because the work cost money and caused disruption. Tenants possessed little power to demand repairs. The urban privy took many forms. Some seats opened into a pit, others emptied into a removable container. In British industrial districts, ash pit privies mixed dry household ash with fecal material, producing a mass that scavengers removed. Pail closets used containers intended for frequent collection. These conservancy systems consumed less water than water closets and allowed some recovery of fertilizer. Their safety depended on reliable pickup, sound containers, protected transport, and a suitable destination. A missed round quickly became a health threat. Landlords and local authorities argued over responsibility. Property owners resisted requirements that increased costs. Ratepayers opposed expensive municipal works. Engineers disagreed about whether water carriage or dry collection was preferable. Farmers sometimes wanted urban manure, but complained when it contained glass, metal, cinders, and industrial waste. Railways expanded the possible market for fertilizer, while cheap guano and later chemical fertilizers weakened demand. No solution could be judged apart from its financing. 19th century sanitary reformers wrote vivid reports about overflowing privies, damp cellars and courts without water. Their investigations exposed real suffering, but their language often portrayed poor residents as objects of disgust. Edwin Chadwick's 1842 report on the sanitary condition of the laboring population of Great Britain argued that filth and defective drainage contributed to disease and economic loss. He favored arterial drainage and water-based removal. Chadwick's administrative energy mattered, yet his certainty sometimes exceeded the medical evidence of his day. Most physicians and officials explained epidemic disease through some combination of miasma, predisposition, climate. Miasma referred broadly to unhealthy air associated with decay. The theory was wrong as an account of the cholera bacterium, but it directed attention toward foul environments. Contagionists emphasized transmission between people, though they did not necessarily understand microorganisms. These positions were not simple camps, and practitioners modified their views as outbreaks unfolded. Cholera reached Britain in major waves beginning in 1831, 1832, after spreading from South Asia along trade and military routes. Its sudden vomiting, diarrhea, dehydration, and death terrified cities. Victims could decline within hours. Officials imposed quarantines, cleaned streets, burned tar, fumigated rooms, and debated water. Poor neighborhoods suffered intensely because crowding, inadequate supplies, and shared facilities amplified exposure. Wealth offered escape and cleaner sources, though it did not guarantee immunity. The British Public Health Act of 1848 created a General Board of Health and allowed local boards under specified conditions. It was a significant step toward municipal responsibility, but implementation was uneven, and the central board was temporary. Later legislation, especially the Public Health Act of 1875, consolidated duties concerning sewers, water, nuisances, and housing in England and Wales. Statutes did not build pipes by themselves. Surveys, borrowing powers, local politics, contractors, and inspectors gaunted law into service. John Snow's investigation of the 1854 cholera outbreak around Broad Street in Soho has become an origin story of epidemiology. Snow had already argued that cholera was swallowed in contaminated material rather than breathed from bad air. During the outbreak, he gathered information about deaths and water use. A map helped display the cluster, while interviews and comparisons supported his case. The Broad Street pump was a focus because many victims had consumed its water. The parish authorities removed the pump handle after Snow presented his findings, although cases were already declining. This action did not single-handedly end the outbreak, nor did it immediately establish germ theory. Investigators later linked contamination of the well to a nearby cesspool in a household cholera case, but aspects of the precise pathway remain reconstructed from records. Snow's achievement lay in combining a causal hypothesis with careful population evidence, not in drawing dots alone. Another of Snow's studies compared households supplied by competing water companies. One company drew from a more polluted reach of the Thames, while another moved its intake upstream. Mortality differences offered a powerful natural experiment. Even so, many contemporaries remained unconvinced. The cholera bacterium had been observed by Filippo Pacini in 1854, yet his work was not widely influential at the time. Robert Koch's later identification and laboratory study of Vibrio cholerae in the 1880s helped secure bacteriological acceptance. London's wastewater crisis was inseparable from the spread of water closets. As more households flushed into drains, cesspools overflowed and sewers carried greater loads to the Thames. The river supplied water companies and received the city's waste. Hot weather in 1858 intensified the smell beside Parliament during the episode remembered as the Great Stink. Curtains soaked in disinfectant could not keep the odor from legislators. The crisis created political urgency for works already under discussion. Joseph Bazalgette, chief engineer of the Metropolitan Board of Works, directed the design and construction of London's intercepting sewer network. The system collected flows from older local sewers before they entered central stretches of the Thames, then carried them eastward by gravity and pumping. Embankments housed major sewers along with roads and other services. Construction required tunnels, bridges, pumps, millions of bricks, careful gradients, and a large labor force. Bazalgette's plan included capacity beyond immediate estimates, which helped the network serve a growing metropolis. It reduced sewage contamination in densely inhabited central areas and contributed to later public health improvement. Yet the initial system did not provide treatment in the modern sense. Outfalls released stored sewage on outgoing tides farther downstream. Communities and ecosystems below London received the burden. Chemical precipitation and other treatment measures were added later, especially after disasters and continuing complaints. One such disaster occurred in September 1878, when the excursion steamer Princess Alice sank after colliding with another vessel near sewage outfalls in the lower Thames. More than 600 people died, though exact totals vary. The polluted water worsened the horror and likely harmed survivors. The event strengthened demands for treatment. It also reminds us that infrastructure judged successful from the center can create hazardous conditions at its edge. Paris followed a related but distinct path. Under the prefect George Eugene Haussmann and engineer Eugene Belgrand during the Second Empire, the city expanded water supplies and built accessible sewer galleries. Workers could enter large conduits for inspection, and separate networks evolved over time. The sewers became objects of civic pride and even tourism. At first, much sewage still reached the Seine. Agricultural irrigation fields at Gennevilliers and elsewhere later used wastewater, combining nutrient recovery with contested health and environmental effects. French debate included the tout à l'égal principle, meaning that everything should go to the sewer. Critics feared loss of fertilizer, water pollution, and expense. Supporters valued removal from buildings and streets. Connection requirements expanded gradually rather than in one decisive moment. Cesspools persisted, and private property adaptation lagged behind main construction. The grand underground gallery was only useful when households could reach it and downstream disposal was managed. Hamburg's experience shows how epidemic could accelerate reform without creating change from nothing. Engineer William Lindley had designed a sewer and water system after the Great Fire of 1842. Decades later, in 1892, cholera struck Hamburg severely, while neighboring Altona experienced fewer cases, partly because Altona filtered water drawn from the Elbe. Hamburg's supply remained inadequately filtered. Robert Koch and public controversy focused attention on administration, poverty, and delay. The city subsequently strengthened filtration and public health institutions. Berlin, Frankfurt, and other German cities chose varying combinations of sewers, treatment, and sewage farms. Berlin's radial system, developed under engineer James Hobrecht, pumped wastewater to irrigation fields outside the city. The arrangement removed sewage from urban streets and used nutrients, but land capacity, groundwater, odor, and suburban growth eventually created difficulties. No European model was merely copied without adaptation. Terrain, municipal boundaries, farming markets, and political authority shaped each network. Across the Atlantic, 19th-century American cities confronted the same entanglement of privies, water supplies, fires, and rapid growth. Early sewers often existed chiefly for stormwater. Authorities sometimes prohibited privy waste from entering them, fearing blockages and polluted outlets. As piped water and water closets spread, such separation became difficult to maintain. Boston, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and smaller cities built networks through different financing and administrative paths. Chicago's low, wet terrain produced a famous engineering response. Beginning in the 1850s, workers raised streets and large buildings while constructing sewers beneath them. The Chicago River still received waste, threatening Lake Michigan water intakes. In 1900, the Sanitary and Ship Canal reversed the river's main flow toward the Mississippi watershed. The project protected the city's lake supply, but exported pollution and provoked legal conflict with downstream states. Hydraulic control again moved risk across a boundary. Tenement reform revealed the distance between a municipal main and a usable household toilet. New York's Tenement House Act of 1901 required improved light, ventilation, fire safety, and toilet provision in new and altered tenements. Earlier buildings had relied heavily on yard privies and shared facilities. Installing water closets raised questions of freezing, maintenance, and landlord compliance. Inspectors documented conditions, yet overcrowding and unequal enforcement persisted. Racial segregation shaped American sanitation as surely as engineering. Black communities, indigenous settlements, immigrant districts, and unincorporated areas were often denied water and sewer investment. Property appraisal, annexation policy, restrictive covenants, and political exclusion influenced which streets gained mains. In rural parts of the United States, inadequate soil, poverty, and discrimination still leave households with failing septic systems or improvised disposal. The sanitary city was never evenly mapped. The septic tank offered an on-site alternative where sewer connection was impractical. In the 1890s, systems using settling and anaerobic decomposition were developed and named in Europe, with Donald Cameron's work in Exeter commonly associated with the term septic tank. Wastewater enters a watertight chamber where solids settle and scum rises. Microorganisms break down part of the organic matter without oxygen. Effluent then needs further treatment, commonly through a soil absorption field. A septic tank is not a box that makes sewage disappear. Accumulated sludge must be pumped by trained operators. The drain field requires suitable, unsaturated soil and adequate area. Flooding, heavy vehicle traffic, tree roots, excessive water use, or poor maintenance can cause failure. Wells need protective distance. When subdivisions place many systems on small lots, nutrients and pathogens may reach groundwater. Successful on-site sanitation depends on site evaluation, inspection, affordable emptying, and a legal destination for septage. Colonial governments used sanitation to divide as well as protect. European empires often invested in drains, piped water, and toilets in administrative quarters, military cantonments, settler neighborhoods, and commercial centers while neglecting colonized districts. Officials described local populations through racialized notions of dirt and disease. Sanitary cordons, demolition, forced relocation, and compulsory inspection could become instruments of control. In plague-stricken Bombay at the end of the 19th century, colonial interventions included invasive searches and segregation that generated resistance. Improvement schemes cleared crowded areas while displacing residents. Water and drainage projects did expand, but benefits followed property and political power. Similar patterns appeared in African and Southeast Asian ports, where authorities protected trade routes and European enclaves before universal service. Public health cannot be separated from the unequal state that delivered it. Colonial archives must therefore be read against their own assumptions. A report labeling a neighborhood unsanitary may accurately describe dangerous drains while concealing why investment was withheld. It may criticize local habits yet ignore municipal failures or land restrictions. Indigenous and colonized workers built, cleaned, and emptied the systems that officials claimed as imperial achievement. Their expertise was needed even when their voices were excluded from plans. In South Asia, dry latrines and conservancy systems placed a particularly heavy burden on communities assigned manual scavenging. Workers removed excreta by hand from containers, shallow pits, railway tracks, and drains. The occupation became deeply entangled with caste discrimination, especially affecting Dalit communities and women. A household's apparent cleanliness could depend on another person's daily exposure and inherited exclusion. Indian reformers challenged this arrangement across the 20th century, while governments promoted conversion to sanitary latrines and sewer expansion. Mahatma Gandhi condemned untouchability and spoke repeatedly about sanitation, though his approach to caste and scavenging has been debated by Dalit thinkers. Ambedkar's broader struggle against caste oppression placed dignity, rights, and structural change at the center. Technology alone could not undo a labor system sustained by social hierarchy. India enacted laws prohibiting employment of manual scavengers, including legislation in 1993 and the broader prohibition of employment as manual scavengers and their Rehabilitation Act in 2013. The practice nevertheless persists in forms such as hazardous sewer and septic tank cleaning. Official definitions, identification surveys, subcontracting, and weak enforcement complicate measurement. Deaths from toxic gases in confined spaces continue to be reported. Mechanical equipment, training, protective procedures, rehabilitation, and accountability are all necessary. The issue distinguishes manual scavenging from all sanitation labor. Emptying a properly designed pit with suitable equipment is essential work. Forcing a person into direct contact with fresh excreta because of cast and unsafe design is an abuse. Mechanization must not merely replace one precarious job with another. Workers need stable employment, healthcare, insurance, respect, and a voice in system design. Public toilets introduced another geography of inclusion. 19th century European and North American cities built urinals for men more readily than facilities for women. Planners assumed respectable women remained near home or could rely on department stores and railway stations. This absence restricted movement, employment, and political participation, creating what campaigners described as a urinary leash. Women's organizations campaigned for public conveniences, despite opposition from people who considered their presence indecent. Proposed sites provoked disputes over visibility and property values. Even when women's toilets were added, equal floor area did not create equal capacity, because cubicles take more space than urinals, and many users need longer for menstruation, pregnancy, clothing, or caregiving. Lines revealed design assumptions made concrete. Pay toilets raised further conflict. Charging might fund an attendant and cleaning, but it denied access to anyone without money. In the United States, campaigns against pay toilets gained momentum in the 1960s and 1970s, arguing that bodily necessity should not be monetized and that women paid more often because free urinals served men. Many jurisdictions remove coin locks, though fees remain common in other countries and private venues. Free entry does not by itself guarantee cleanliness, opening hours, or safety. Transgender and gender non-conforming people have faced harassment, exclusion, and laws governing restroom use. Debates framed as privacy can obscure the practical need to use a facility without danger. Gender-neutral single-user rooms help some users, but are not a complete substitute for safe access across public space. Good design provides options rather than marking one group as a problem. Disability rights transform toilet planning by making barriers visible. A doorway too narrow for a wheelchair, a high threshold, a misplaced grab rail, an inaccessible latch, or insufficient transfer space can make a nominal facility unusable. People with limited dexterity, visual impairments, continence conditions, chronic pain, or a need for assistance encounter additional requirements. Building codes set minimums, but compliance measured on paper can fail when bins block maneuvering space or alarms are poorly maintained. Changing places facilities, developed in Britain and adopted in other countries, include an adult-sized changing bench, hoist, generous floor area, and space for carers. Their emergence demonstrates that the conventional accessible cubicle did not serve everyone. At the same time, installation without reliable opening information or staff support leaves gaps. Dignity depends on operation as much as hardware. School sanitation carries consequences beyond health. A child may avoid drinking all day because toilets are dirty, lack doors, or invite bullying. Girls may miss class when menstrual materials, water disposal, and privacy are absent. Children with disabilities can be excluded by steps or cramped stalls. Soap and hand-washing facilities must be supplied, not merely drawn on a plan. Maintenance budgets, cleaners, and student participation determine whether a new block remains usable. In boarding schools, refugee education centers, and informal settlements, the distance and route to a toilet matter. Lighting affects safety. Separate facilities may support privacy in some contexts, while inclusive options protect students who do not fit a binary arrangement. Young children need seats and hand-washing points at an appropriate height. The most technically advanced design fails if pupils fear entering it. By the beginning of the 20th century, Soured cities faced a question that earlier networks had postponed. What should happen after collection? Screens could remove rags and large debris. Sedimentation tanks allowed heavier solids to settle. Chemical precipitation captured some suspended material. Land treatment used soil and vegetation. Each method reduced selected pollutants, produced residual sludge, and demanded space or labor. The activated sludge process emerged in Britain through experiments by Edward Arden and William Lockett at Manchester's Davholm Works in 1913 and 1914. Wastewater was aerated with a microbial-rich sludge. Bacteria and other organisms formed flocks that consumed dissolved and suspended organic matter. In a settling tank, those flocks separated from treated water. Part of the sludge returned to sustain the process. The method was compact compared with broad sewage farms and spread internationally. Activated sludge is a living system rather than a mechanical sieve. Operators control oxygen, retention time, sludge age, and flow. Toxic industrial discharges can disrupt microbes. Cold weather changes reaction rates. Aeration consumes substantial energy. Excess biological sludge must be stabilized, dewatered, reused, incinerated, or disposed of. A treatment plant converts a diffuse water problem into several managed streams. It never abolishes matter. Primary treatment mainly settles solids. Secondary biological treatment removes much biodegradable organic matter. Advanced process can target nitrogen, phosphorus, micropollutants. These categories vary by jurisdiction and plant design. A clear final effluent may still contain dissolved nutrients. Nitrogen and phosphorus released into lakes or coastal waters can feed algal blooms, deplete oxygen, and damage ecosystems. Disinfection adds another barrier. Chlorine became widely used for drinking water and wastewater in the early 20th century. It can inactivate many pathogens and provide residual protection, but dose and contact time matter. Chlorine reacts with organic substances to form byproducts, some of which pose health or ecological concerns. Dechlorination may be required before discharge. Ultraviolet light and ozone offer alternatives with their own energy, maintenance, and performance limits. Treatment improved life in many cities while depending on extensive sampling. Laboratory staff measure biochemical oxygen demand, suspended solids, nutrients, indicator organisms, and other parameters. Sensors track flow and dissolved oxygen. Regulations set discharge conditions, and inspectors investigate failures. These quiet systems of measurement rarely appear in popular histories, yet they allow a plant to respond before invisible changes become a public crisis. Combined sewers carry both wastewater and storm runoff in one pipe. They were practical in older cities where a single network served multiple purposes. During dry weather, flow travels to treatment. Heavy rain can exceed pipe or plant capacity, triggering combined sewer overflows that release diluted but untreated sewage to rivers or coasts. The overflow protects streets and treatment works from catastrophic backup while transferring pollution to receiving water. Cities address overflows through storage tunnels, retention tanks, sewer separation, pump-up upgrades, real-time controls, green roofs, permeable pavement, rain gardens, and reduced infiltration. Each measure has cost and spatial consequences. Digging a vast tunnel may spare central property disruption at great expense. Green infrastructure requires distributed care. Climate change intensifies short, heavy downpours in many regions, making historical design assumptions less reliable. Sanitary sewers intended only for wastewater can also overflow. Cracked pipes admit groundwater. Illegal storm connections add flow, pumps lose power, and grease or wipes cause blockages. The label flushable on a product does not mean it breaks apart like toilet paper. Wet wipes bind with fats into stubborn masses, Public advice matters, but utilities and manufacturers also shape what enters the system. The sewer worker enters a world most residents never see. Confined spaces may contain toxic or oxygen-deficient atmospheres, rapidly rising water, biological hazards, traffic risk, electrical equipment, and heavy machinery. Safe entry requires atmospheric testing, ventilation, isolation, communication, rescue planning, and protective equipment. Sending an untrained person into a manhole to retrieve a collapsed colleague often creates multiple fatalities. Procedures exist because instinct alone is not enough underground. Most people in the world have not always depended on a conventional sewer, and many never will. Low-density settlements, difficult terrain, limited water, and the immense cost of buried networks favor on-site systems. A well-built pit latrine can separate feces from human contact without continuous flushing. Its essential components are simple: a stable pit, a washable slab, an opening that limits access by insects, shelter, privacy, and a location that protects water. Simplicity does not remove the need for informed design. Pit depth and position must reflect soil and groundwater. Impermeable ground, liquid spreads outward. In clay, infiltration is slower. A high water table raises the risk of contamination and flooding. Rock makes excavation difficult. Unlined walls may collapse in unstable soil, whereas fully sealed pits fill faster because liquid cannot infiltrate. Designers also consider the distance to wells, the direction of groundwater flow, and seasonal change. A fixed separation rule cannot replace a local hydrogeological assessment. Ventilated improved pit latrines, commonly called VIP latrines, add a vertical pipe fitted with a fly screen. Sun warms the dark pipe and helps draw odors upward. Flies attracted toward light enter the pipe, but are blocked by the screen. If the cubicle remains relatively dark, the arrangement can reduce insects inside. Performance depends on pipe diameter, height, wind, screen condition, and user behavior. A broken screen turns the vent into an escape route. Twin pit designs allow one chamber to rest while another receives waste. During the resting period, decomposition and pathogen die-off make later handling less hazardous, though not automatically harmless. Alternating flow requires valves or covers that users understand. If both pits receive liquid at once, neither rest properly. Emptying too soon defeats the purpose. Clear ownership and instruction matter as much as the masonry between the chambers. Poor flush toilets use a small volume of water to move excreta through a water seal toward a pit or septic tank. The seal limits odor and insects, offering a familiar interface without a cistern. It still needs enough water, and hard objects can block the bend. Where households must carry every bucket, even a few liters per use, have a daily cost, usually paid in women's and girls' labor. Water-saving design should account for who fetches the supply. As pits fill, the hidden service chain becomes visible. In a spacious rural compound, a household may cover a full pit and build elsewhere. Dense settlements lack that option. Structures stand close together, lanes are narrow, and tenancy is insecure. Emptying becomes unavoidable. A city can report high toilet excess while sludge from those facilities is dumped untreated because vacuum trucks cannot reach them or legal disposal costs too much. Fecal sludge contains concentrated solids, water, pathogens, household chemicals, and whatever users discarded into the pit. Vacuum tankers can remove pumpable material through hoses. Thick sludge may require agitation or specialized pumps. Where access is narrow, smaller motorized units, handcarts, or container-based systems can bridge the distance to a transfer station. Manual emptying with buckets remains common in some places and carries severe exposure unless fresh waste has been safely isolated and tools prevent contact. Collection is only the middle of the route. A tanker needs an approved discharge point that is open when it arrives and priced within reach. Treatment may use settling, thickening tanks, drying beds, anaerobic digestion, composting, co-treatment at a wastewater plant, or other locally selected processes. Each produces liquids, solids, or gases requiring further management. An impressive vehicle fleet accomplishes little if drivers save time by releasing loads into a drain. Scheduled desludging programs try to replace emergency service with predictable visits. Instead of waiting for overflow, a utility empties tanks according to risk and design. Fees may be spread across bills, reducing the sudden cost to a household. Such programs work best when they include poor and rented homes, support safe disposal, and adjust intervals to actual accumulation rather than assuming every tank fills at the same rate. Container-based sanitation offers another route in places where pits or sewers are unsuitable. A sealable cartridge beneath a dry toilet is collected frequently and replaced with a clean one. This can provide dignified service in flood-prone informal neighborhoods, rented compounds, or rocky terrain. It requires dependable logistics and long-term finance. If collection stops, the household cannot simply wait for a distant repair crew. Urine-diverting dry toilets keep urine separate from feces at the source. Separation reduces odor and the volume of material requiring prolonged treatment. Urine contains much of the nitrogen and phosphorus excreted by the body, giving it potential fertilizer value after appropriate storage or treatment. Feces can be dried or composted. The user interface demands care. Misplaced water or cleansing material may disrupt the dry chamber, and pipes can accumulate mineral deposits. Ecological sanitation is sometimes presented as a return to a perfect nutrient cycle. The aspiration is valuable, but safety depends on barriers. Helminthigs can survive in fecal material for long periods. Compost temperature, moisture, pH, storage time, and mixing determine pathogen reduction. Urine may contain pharmaceuticals or pathogens. Urine may contain pharmaceuticals or pathogens in small amounts. Farmers need guidance on application timing, crop type, dose, and protective handling. The nutrient argument remains important. Modern agriculture depends heavily on synthetic nitrogen produced through the energy-intensive Haber-Bosch process and on mined phosphorus, a finite and geographically concentrated resource. Human excreta contains plant nutrients that conventional wastewater treatment often spends energy removing. Recovering nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, and water could reduce pollution and support farming. The challenge is to create products that are safe, trusted, affordable, and practical to transport. Struvide recovery provides one example. Under controlled conditions, magnesium, ammonium, and phosphate crystallize into a mineral that can be used as fertilizer. In an uncontrolled pipe, the same crystal creates scale and blockages. Treatment plants can encourage precipitation in reactors, turning a maintenance problem into a product. The process captures only part of the nutrient flow, and market value rarely pays for an entire sanitation service. Still, it demonstrates how waste categories can change through design. Anaerobic digestion uses microorganisms to break down organic matter without oxygen, producing biogas rich in methane in a residual digest state. Large treatment plants digest sludge. Smaller systems may process manure, food waste, and toilet inputs. Captured gas can heat equipment or generate electricity. Leaking methane undermines climate benefits, and digestate needs safe use or disposal. Digestion reduces pathogens, but may not eliminate every organism. Composting toilets manage feces with carbon-rich material. Ventilation, time, and controlled moisture. Some systems separate urine. Others accept all inputs. A small device marketed for a cabin differs greatly from a professionally managed composting facility. Users must not assume that material leaving a chamber is immediately garden-ready. Regulations and testing vary. In cold climates, biological activity slows. In public buildings, contamination with plastics and cleaning chemicals complicates treatment. Toilet paper has its own environmental history. People have used water, leaves, cloth, moss, wool, pottery fragments, corn cobs, and many other materials depending on place and status. Commercial paper made specifically for toilets became available in the 19th century, with perforated rolls popularized later. Modern sewer systems expect rapidly dispersing paper. Thick tissues, wipes, menstrual products, diapers, and cloth behave differently. The interface between personal comfort and pipe performance is engineered rather than obvious. Water-based cleansing remains normal across much of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Europe and Latin America. Lota vessels, hoses, bidets, and integrated spray toilets require drainage and user space suited to washing. Designers trained in dry paper cultures sometimes omit a floor drain or provide electrical fixtures where water will splash. A globally usable toilet cannot assume one cleansing practice. Cultural competence appears in slopes, taps, handholds, and easy-to-clean surfaces. The modern public restroom contains many technologies that seem minor until they fail. Locks, hinges, lighting, ventilation, soap dispensers, hand dryers, sanitary bins, infant changing tables, alarms, signage, and cleaning water points. Every additional feature creates a maintenance task. Touchless sensors may reduce contact but misread dark clothing or fail when batteries die. Automatic flushes can surprise users and waste water. Reliability often matters more than novelty. Cleaning is a form of infection prevention, not decoration. Workers need suitable chemicals, color-coded tools where required, gloves, ventilation, training, and enough time. Mixing bleach with acids or ammonia can release dangerous gases. Spraying high-pressure water may aerosolize contamination. A checklist cannot substitute for staffing. When budgets cut cleaning while preserving a polished entrance, the institution reveals what it values. Sanitation workers occupy many positions: street sweepers, toilet attendants, pit emptiers, tanker drivers, drain cleaners, sewer operators, laboratory technicians, treatment plant staff, plumbers, and waste pickers. Their risks differ, but public recognition is generally low. A 2019 global report by the World Bank, World Health Organization, International Labour Organization, and WaterAid emphasized health, safety, and dignity across the workforce. Hazards include infection, toxic gases, injuries, stigma, insecure contracts, and poverty wages. Formal employment does not guarantee protection. A municipal utility may subcontract high-risk work through several layers, making responsibility difficult to trace. Temporary workers may lack insurance or training. Protective equipment supplied for a photograph may be uncomfortable, inappropriate to heat, or unavailable in the correct size. Genuine safety begins with eliminating unnecessary entry and exposure, then adds engineering controls, procedures, equipment, medical care, and worker authority to stop a dangerous task. Robotic cameras, jetting machines, suction equipment, and remotely operated tools can reduce confined space entry. Mechanization, however, must be selected for the actual sewer or pit. A large imported machine may not fit narrow lanes, find spare parts, or handle dense sludge. Workers who understand local systems should participate in procurement. Their knowledge prevents expensive equipment from becoming an unused monument. Public attitudes create another hazard. Residents may want waste removed while treating removers as untouchable. Children of sanitation workers can encounter discrimination at school, and families may hide the occupation. Campaigns that celebrate essential work are useful only if accompanied by wages, legal rights, and safe conditions. Dignity is not a poster placed over exploitation. War strips sanitation to its essentials. Bombed water mains, power loss, displaced populations, and blocked roads can disable a sophisticated network within hours. People sheltering in basements or transit stations improvise containers when toilets cannot flush. Hospitals produce larger waste loads while losing staff and supplies. Repair crews may work under fire. The effects extend beyond immediate diarrhea. Interrupted wastewater treatment contaminates rivers, and damaged industrial sites add chemicals. Military camps historically learned, often through severe outbreaks, that latrine placement and discipline mattered. Field manuals specified distance from kitchens and water, depth, fly control, and covering. Such rules reduced risk only when troops followed them and terrain allowed it. Frozen ground, monsoon rain, and rapidly shifting lines forced adaptation. Armies also left polluted sites for civilians to manage after departure. In refugee and displacement camps, emergency agencies aim first for rapid access, then improvement. A shallow trench may serve briefly during the first days, but it is unsuitable for long occupation. Latrines should be reachable, lit, private, culturally acceptable, and separated from water sources. Consultation with women, older people, children, and disabled residents identifies hazards invisible on an engineer's map. Locks must secure a door from inside without trapping someone during panic. Population estimates determine how many facilities are needed, yet displacement changes hour by hour. Queues grow, pits fill, and rainy seasons arrive. Emptying routes requires space from the beginning. Soap, menstrual materials, child feces disposal, and hand washing are part of the same emergency program. A toilet block completed without an operation plan becomes a temporary photograph rather than a service. Natural disasters produce different failures. Earthquakes break pipes and shift tank walls. Tsunamis flood wells with salt water and sewage. Cyclones tear roofs from toilet shelters. River floods submerge pits, carrying contents across settlements. Drought reduces flushing water and concentrates wastewater. Emergency repair should avoid rebuilding the same vulnerability in the same place merely because an old plan is convenient. Flood-resilient sanitation may elevate containment above expected water levels, seal tanks, anchor components against flotation, and provide safe overflow or temporary storage. Yet an elevated toilet needs accessible ramps, stable stairs, and a structure that survives wind. In delta regions, floating or raised systems can serve particular communities. Each option balances cost, emptying, cultural acceptance, and increasingly uncertain flood records. Drought challenges soured cities too. Lower flow allows solids to settle in pipes and increases odor. Residents may conserve water while old networks need a minimum transport volume. Treatment plants receive stronger wastewater. Reclaimed water can support industry, irrigation, or toilet flushing, reducing pressure on freshwater supplies. Separate non-potable networks need clear controls to prevent cross-connections. Wastewater reuse has ancient precedents. But modern systems add treatment targets, monitoring, and risk management. Highly treated reclaimed water can irrigate landscapes, cool power plants, recharge aquifers, or, with advanced processes, augment drinking water supplies. Public acceptance depends on transparency and trust. The phrase toilet to tap can provoke disgust while obscuring that all river water participates in cycles. Safety rests on multiple barriers and continuous verification, not on rhetoric. Climate mitigation introduces a further concern. Wastewater treatment uses electricity and emits greenhouse gases. Nitrous oxide can arise during biological nitrogen removal. while methane escapes from anaerobic zones and poorly managed sewers or pits. Utilities reduce emissions through energy efficiency, gas capture, process control, and renewable power. Measuring these flows is difficult, and a climate project must not compromise pathogen removal. Sea level rise threatens coastal outfalls, pump stations, and groundwater. Salt water corrodes equipment and changes biological processes. Higher tides reduce gravity discharge and increase backflow risk. Informal neighborhoods on low land often face the earliest damage while having the least political protection. Climate resilience is therefore an equity decision about whose service is defended. Digital monitoring can help. Sensors track pump status, tank levels, rainfall, and water quality. Geographic information systems map assets and complaints. Predictive models identify blockage risk. But data systems inherit omissions. An unregistered settlement may be absent from the map, and a sensor cannot replace a worker who knows that a lane floods after a particular storm. Cybersecurity and power backup become part of sanitation when controls are networked. The history of toilets also touches architecture in quiet ways. Bringing a privy indoors required ventilation, water-resistant surfaces, sound insulation, and dependable drainage. Stacked bathrooms reduced pipe length in multi-story buildings. Traps needed venting so pressure changes did not siphon away their water seals. Building codes gradually specified pipe diameters, gradients, cleanouts, and connections. The room that seems private is shaped by rules negotiated across the whole city. A plumbing trap holds a small reservoir of water in a curved pipe. Flow pushes through while enough remains to block sewer gases. If a fixture is unused for a long time, evaporation can break the seal. Pressure from moving water may siphon it. A vent admits air to prevent that. Hair, grease, and objects can obstruct it. The elegant idea, patented in the 18th century, became reliable through an entire supporting practice of venting, materials, and inspection. Sewer gas is not one substance. It may include hydrogen sulfide, methane, ammonia, carbon dioxide, and other compounds. Odor at low concentrations warns of a defect, but smell cannot measure safety because olfactory fatigue can make hydrogen sulfide seem to disappear as danger increases. Household traps primarily protect comfort and hygiene. Industrial and confined spaces require instruments. Folklore about deadly household miasmas, sometimes exaggerated risk, while workers underground faced genuine lethal atmospheres. The dual-flush toilet, pressure-assisted systems, low-flow fixtures, and improved bowl geometry sought to reduce water consumption during the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Early low-flow mandates sometimes encountered poor designs that required repeated flushing, better engineering coordinated trapway, surface, flush volume, and drain performance. Saving water at the fixture is beneficial. Yet utilities must evaluate how lower flow affects old sewers. Vacuum toilets use air pressure and small amounts of water to move waste. Aircraft and trains employ them because weight and storage matter. Ships use vacuum systems to reduce water demand in control tanks. Large buildings and specialized developments can also adopt them. Their pumps and seals need maintenance, and a power loss changes operation. A dramatic suction sound signals a different transport mechanism, not disappearance. On ships, sanitation has long been constrained by motion, salt, limited fresh water, and the need to store or discharge waste. Sailing vessels use seats or platforms near the bow, giving rise to the term head for a marine toilet. Wind and waves offered removal but little privacy. Later valve closets and holding tanks improve containment. International rules now restrict sewage discharge according to vessel type, treatment, and distance, though enforcement across oceans remains challenging. Railway toilets, once released waste directly onto tracks through an open chute. Signs asked passengers not to use them while a train stood at a station, placing responsibility on individual timing rather than containment. Track workers bore the consequences. Retention tanks and controlled discharge systems gradually replaced open designs, though adoption varied widely. A moving vehicle made the old practice less visible to travelers without making it safe for anyone below. Aircraft store waste in sealed tanks serviced on the ground. Modern blue deodorizing fluids and vacuum systems reduce water and weight. Servicing crews connect hoses and transport the contents to an approved sewer or treatment facility. Rare incidents of frozen leakage, sensationally called blue ice, receive attention because they are unusual. The ordinary success is a logistics chain synchronized between flights, airports, utilities, and workers. The space station offers an extreme version of resource recovery. Airflow replaces gravity to guide urine and feces. Urine enters a water recovery process, while solid waste is sealed for disposal. Astronauts train to align themselves with small openings because ordinary terrestrial assumptions no longer apply. Space toilets are costly, delicate, and highly specialized, but they clarify a principle familiar on Earth. In a closed environment, nothing can simply be sent away. At the opposite scale, a person sleeping rough in a wealthy city may have no lawful place to go after a public toilet closes. Businesses restrict facilities to customers, parks lock gates, and transit stations reduce hours. Urinating or defecating outside can bring fines that deepen poverty. The shortage is often described as individual disorder, even when infrastructure has been deliberately withdrawn. A city reveals its understanding of citizenship through the availability of a basic private act. 24-hour public toilets demand durable materials and careful management, but designs built like fortresses can feel hostile. Blue lighting, once installed to deter intravenous drug use, can impair visibility for many users without resolving addiction. Short doors improve surveillance while reducing privacy. Time limits may discourage sheltering but punish people with bowel conditions. Design choices distribute suspicion. Attended facilities often remain cleaner and safer because a worker notices shortages, repairs, overdoses, harassment, and accessibility problems. The attendant should have a protected workspace, training, fair pay, and emergency support. Removing staff to save money shifts the cost to users and repair crews. Automation cannot reassure a frightened child or recognize that a disabled patron needs assistance. Public health approaches increasingly place overdose response supplies, sharps containers, or outreach information in restrooms. Critics fear that acknowledging drug use encourages it. Evidence-based programs instead recognize an existing reality and try to prevent death and injury. Toilets become contact points between private vulnerability and public service. Staff must not be left to manage complex crises without professional backup. For people with inflammatory bowel disease, ostomies, diabetes, pregnancy, prostate conditions, or medication-related urgency, rapid access determines whether they can travel and work. Some jurisdictions have restroom access laws asking businesses to permit use by people with qualifying medical needs when employee facilities are available. Such measures help, but can require disclosure of private information. A dense network of genuinely public toilets is less stigmatizing. The sanitation needs of older people expand as balance, strength, vision, and continence change. A stable seat at the right height, contrasting colors, adequate light, reachable paper, and nearby handholds reduce falls. Dementia-friendly signs use familiar images and simple routes. A mirror that appears as another person may distress some users. Thoughtful detail can preserve independence longer than a conspicuous technological feature. Children require more than miniature seats. Caregivers need room to enter, set down belongings, and supervise more than one child. Changing tables placed only in women's rooms assume that fathers and other carers do not change diapers. Disposal containers should control odor without forcing workers to handle loose waste. Child feces can contain high pathogen loads. The common belief that they are harmless is dangerous. Menstrual health connects toilet access to water, privacy, materials information, and waste management. A door lock alone is insufficient if there is no place to wash hands or change absorbent products. Reusable materials need safe washing and drying. Disposable products need discreet collection and a treatment route that does not block sewers or expose cleaners. Incineration may be appropriate at some institutions, but requires emissions controls and trained operation. Incontinence products and diapers create a growing solid waste stream. They combine plastics, absorbent polymers, cellulose, and biological material. Flushing them causes severe blockages. Landfilling preserves plastics, while recycling is technically difficult because contents and materials must be separated hygienically. Product design, collection services, and extended producer responsibility may all contribute to better handling. Toilet availability affects labor. Agricultural workers, delivery drivers, street vendors, domestic workers, construction crews, and security guards may spend hours without access. Employers sometimes restrict breaks or fail to provide facilities near work sites. Workers then reduce drinking, increasing dehydration and urinary problems. A regulation is meaningful only when distance, cleanliness, and break time make use possible. Prisons, detention centers, and psychiatric institutions reveal the relationship between toilets and coercion. Open toilets and shared cells remove privacy. Staff may control flushing, paper, or access as punishment. Constant camera surveillance can capture intimate acts. Suicide prevention design has legitimate aims, but should minimize humiliation. International standards frame adequate sanitation as part of humane treatment, not a reward for compliance. Hospitals require toilets that interrupt rather than spread infection. Patients with diarrhea may need dedicated facilities. Surfaces should tolerate cleaning, and drains must retain water seals. Hand-washing sinks, bedpan washers, commodes, and clinical waste streams have different purposes. An overflowing patient toilet can close rooms and expose vulnerable people. Infection control teams depend on plumbers and environmental service workers as much as on medical staff. Healthcare facilities in low-resource or crisis settings may lack functional toilets or water. A building can be counted as a clinic while staff and patients practice open defecation nearby. Women giving birth need sanitation that protects privacy and reduces infection risk. Placental and clinical waste should not enter an ordinary pit without assessment. Universal health coverage is impossible when the place delivering care cannot safely manage bodily waste. The spread of antimicrobial resistance adds urgency. Antibiotic-resistant organisms and drug residues enter wastewater from households, hospitals, farms, and factories. Treatment removes some but not all. Poorly controlled pharmaceutical manufacturing discharges can create exceptionally high concentrations. Sewage surveillance helps detect resistance patterns, while pollution controls reduce environmental selection pressure. Toilets are one entry point into a much larger system of medicine, production, and ecology. Wastewater-based epidemiology gained public attention during the COVID-19 pandemic. Laboratories measured fragments of viral genetic material in sewage, providing community-level trends independent of individual testing. Similar surveillance can track poliovirus, influenza, drug consumption, and other indicators. Sampling requires knowledge of the sewer catchment and careful interpretation. An increase in concentration may reflect prevalence, flow, industrial dilution, or sampling conditions. Sewer surveillance is less straightforward where many households use pits or lack service. Sampling only a networked district can exclude poorer residents and distort the city picture. Ethical safeguards matter, because small catchments might stigmatize a building or neighborhood. Public health gains should not turn wastewater into a tool for punitive monitoring. Aggregation, transparency, and limits on use are essential. Parasite evidence offers a different kind of wastewater surveillance across centuries. Eggs of whipworm and roundworm possess durable shells that can survive in latrine sediments. Tapeworm eggs and protozoan traces appear under particular preservation conditions. Researchers identify them microscopically or through molecular methods. Their presence indicates infection among some users, not a precise prevalence for the whole population. Ancient latrines can mix deposits from long periods. Soil movement, animals, later disturbance, and redeposition complicate dating. A parasite egg may survive where the toilet seat does not. Comparing sites requires consistent recovery methods, since fine sieving and microscopy detect material missed by older excavations. The emerging picture often challenges assumptions that visually elaborate sanitation guaranteed low infection. Roman parasite studies are a well-known example. Despite aqueducts, baths, sewers, and public latrines, intestinal worms remain common in many excavated settings. Reuse of feces as fertilizer, contaminated food, crowded baths, and incomplete water protection may all have contributed. No single mechanism can be assigned to every site. The evidence does not prove that infrastructure worsened health. It shows that multiple barriers are necessary. Medieval cesspits also preserve parasite histories. Differences between a monastery, castle, port, and household can illuminate diet, travel, and sanitation. Fish tapeworm eggs suggest consumption of raw or insufficiently cooked freshwater fish. Roundworm and whipworm reflect fecal-oral transmission. These tiny remains bring ordinary bodies into an archive otherwise dominated by elites. Modern disease prevention focuses on routes of exposure. Fecal pathogens reach another host through contaminated water, food, hands, soil, flies, surfaces, or direct contact. A toilet creates a barrier only if feces remain contained. Hand washing with soap adds another barrier. Safe water, food hygiene, drainage, vaccination, and treatment contribute others. The strength lies in layers, because any one layer can fail. Cholera remains closely linked to inadequate water and sanitation, especially during conflict and displacement. Oral rehydration therapy prevents many deaths when delivered quickly, while antibiotics have a role in severe cases according to clinical guidance. Vaccination supports outbreak control and prevention, but does not replace services. Long-term protection requires dependable systems rather than emergency response alone. Typhoid fever, caused by Salmonella typhi, spreads through food and water contaminated by human feces. People with chronic infection can continue shedding bacteria, as the history of Mary Mallon in early 20th century New York illustrates. Her enforced isolation raises difficult questions about civil liberty, gender, class, and public protection. Sanitation lowers transmission without requiring the state to locate every carrier. Poliovirus is also shed in feces, making sanitation and surveillance important to eradication. Vaccines are the central tool, yet open sewage permits ongoing transmission where immunity is incomplete. Environmental sampling can reveal circulation before paralysis cases appear. A drain thus becomes an early warning site, though the ultimate goal remains healthy communities rather than clean samples. Soil-transmitted helminths thrive where infected feces contaminate ground and people lack shoes, safe toilets, or hand-washing. Deworming medicines reduce infection burden, but reinfection occurs when exposure continues. Sanitation programs must fit children's behavior and local soil. A slab too frightening or dirty for a child will not interrupt the pathway. Schistosomiasis follows a different cycle involving freshwater snails. Infected people release parasite eggs in urine or feces, depending on species. Larval stages develop in suitable snails and penetrate human skin during water contact. Toilets can reduce eggs reaching water, while safe supplies and snail control measures address other points. Sewer construction alone does not protect someone whose livelihood requires entering infested water. Trachoma, an eye disease associated with the bacterium Chlamydia trachomatis, is linked to crowding, limited water, and flies that breed in exposed feces. Programs combine surgery, antibiotics, facial cleanliness, and environmental improvement. A latrine contributes by reducing fly breeding, but sustained use and maintenance matter. The example shows how toilet design reaches beyond diarrheal disease. Quantifying sanitation progress requires definitions. The WHO and UNICEF Joint Monitoring Program distinguishes service levels rather than merely counting structures. An improved facility is designed to hygienically separate excreta from contact. A basic service uses an improved facility not shared with other households. A limited service uses an improved facility shared by multiple households. Unimproved facilities include certain pits without slabs and other inadequate designs, while open defecation forms the lowest category. For a service to be safely managed under the global indicator, the household relies on its own improved sanitation facility, and excreta are safely disposed of in place or removed and treated elsewhere. This definition restores the destination to the count. A private flush toilet connected to a sewer that discharges untreated wastewater does not meet the full standard, nor does a septic tank emptied into a field without treatment. Shared toilets are classified below basic service in household monitoring, because sharing often creates access and maintenance problems. Yet a well-run communal block may be the most realistic safe option in a dense settlement, while a private collapsing pit is hazardous. Indicators support comparison. They do not replace local judgment. Data gaps are especially large for what happens after on-site systems are emptied. The Joint Monitoring Program's 2025 report estimated that global safely managed sanitation coverage rose from 48% in 2015 to 58% in 2058% in 2024. It reported that 3.4 billion people still lack such a service in 2024, including 354 million practicing open defecation. These are modeled estimates assembled from national data, not a census of every pit and pipe. Their year and definition matter whenever they are quoted. Coverage varies sharply within countries. Rural and urban averages conceal informal settlements, remote islands, minority communities, displaced people, and households with disabled members. Wealth strongly predicts service. Official data may omit renters without recognized addresses or settlements considered illegal. A national percentage can improve while the hardest-to-reach population sees little change. Open defecation is not simply a choice made in ignorance. A household may lack land, money, water, legal tenure, or a safe facility. Women may wait until darkness for privacy and face violence. Past attempts to shame communities have caused harm in hidden practice. Effective programs combine appropriate infrastructure, supply chains, finance, behavior support, and public accountability. Community-led approaches have tried to build collective recognition that exposed feces affects everyone. Some programs achieved rapid change. Others used humiliation, coercion, or targets that encouraged weak construction. A toilet built under pressure can collapse after the first rainy season. Ethical practice respects choice and dignity while addressing the shared health consequence. Subsidy debates reflect a false choice when framed as either total self-reliance or complete government provision. Poor households may need targeted finance, while public investment builds treatment plants, roads, and regulation that no individual can supply. Smart subsidies can reward durable service rather than a one-time structure. Credit alone is inappropriate for someone without income to repay. Sanitation markets include masons, ring manufacturers, plumbers, emptiers, landlords, and retailers. Supporting local businesses improves repair and adaptation. Quality assurance prevents thin slabs and counterfeit parts. Standardization can lower costs, but a single approved model may fail in floodplains or rocky ground. Public institutions set the conditions under which markets serve people rather than only profitable neighborhoods. Land tenure is often decisive. A tenant hesitates to invest in a permanent toilet on property that could be cleared. A landlord gains rent while postponing maintenance. Informal settlements may be excluded from municipal plans because service is wrongly interpreted as legal recognition. Interim infrastructure can protect health without settling every land dispute. Waiting for perfect tenure leaves contamination in place. City-wide inclusive sanitation seeks to plan across sewers, on-site systems, container collection, drainage, and treatment instead of treating one technology as the final goal. It asks whether everyone receives a safe service, whether workers are protected, and whether waste is managed from source to destination. Different neighborhoods may use different systems under one accountable framework. The aim is universal outcomes rather than universal pipes. Regulation must follow actual flows. A wastewater plant can meet standards while unlicensed tankers dump sludge elsewhere. Building approval can require a septic design, yet no agency checks it after occupancy. Responsibility split among health, water, environment, housing, and local government create gaps. Clear mandates, data sharing, enforcement, and accessible complaint routes help close them. Utilities need dependable revenue, but tariffs must remain affordable. Sewer charges may be tied to water consumption, which is practical but imperfect. General taxation can fund public benefits, while connection subsidies help low-income households reach a main already passing their street. Cross-subsidies redistribute cost. Disconnection from water for unpaid sanitation debt creates serious human rights concerns. In 2010, the United Nations General Assembly recognized the human right to safe and clean drinking water and sanitation. Subsequent work clarified principles including availability, accessibility, affordability, safety, acceptability, privacy, dignity, equality, and non-discrimination. Recognition did not instantly create infrastructure. It changed the question from charity towards state obligations. A rights approach does not mean every household receives the same device without charge. It means governments must take deliberate steps using available resources, prioritize those most excluded, avoid discrimination, and create remedies. Services should be sustainable rather than temporary gifts. People must be able to participate in decisions that affect their bodies and neighborhoods. Privacy and safety are part of sanitation quality. A distant facility without lighting may be technically improved yet inaccessible after dark. A school cubicle with no door fails dignity. A public toilet whose attendant demands an unofficial fee excludes poor users. Monitoring should capture experience, not only construction material. Acceptability includes water or cleansing materials suited to local practice, gender needs, odor control, and cultural expectations. Consultation should not freeze culture into stereotype. Communities contain diverse preferences and change over time. Offering choices can support adoption while retaining safety. An engineer's embarrassment about discussing defecation is a design risk. Accountability requires people to know who repairs a blocked toilet, where to report illegal dumping, and how quickly a response should come. Public dashboards can show performance, but residents without internet need other channels. Complaint systems should protect tenants and sanitation workers from retaliation. A right without a remedy remains distant language. The environmental destination completes the picture. Rivers can recover when sewage inputs decline, but sediments retain pollutants and ecological restoration takes time. Coastal outfalls disperse waste without necessarily treating nutrients or pathogens. Groundwater contamination can move slowly and appear years after a pit is abandoned. The timescale of water is longer than a political term. Microplastics, pharmaceuticals, per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, and household chemicals add modern complexity. Conventional treatment plants were not designed for every synthetic compound. Source control can be more effective than trying to remove a persistent chemical after dilution. Product regulation, industrial pretreatment, and safe medication disposal belong within sanitation policy, even though they lie far from the toilet room. Industrial wastewater should not be casually combined with domestic sewage. Metals, solvents, acids, heat, and toxic organics can harm workers, corrode pipes, disrupt biological treatment, and contaminate sludge. Pretreatment programs require industries to control discharges before they enter municipal systems. Monitoring and enforcement prevent a factory from transferring disposal costs to the public. Sludge management remains one of the least visible challenges. Sewage treatment concentrates solids containing organic matter, nutrients, pathogens, metals, and synthetic contaminants. Stabilized biosolids may improve soil when quality is suitable and application is controlled. Incineration reduces volume and can recover energy, but produces ash and air emissions. Landfill disposal uses space and can generate methane. No route is consequence-free. Debates over land application are often polarized between calling biosolids valuable fertilizer and calling them toxic waste. Both descriptions can contain truth depending on source control, treatment, contaminant limits, soil, crop, and exposure. Transparent testing and conservative standards are essential. Farmers and nearby residents deserve full information, not reassurance based only on compliance with an outdated list. The nitrogen problem links household nutrition to coastal dead zones. Protein consumed in a city becomes nitrogen in urine and feces. Treatment converts or removes part of it. The rest may reach water. Biological nutrient removal transforms ammonia through nitrification and denitrification, ultimately releasing harmless nitrogen gas. But the process consumes energy and can emit nitrous oxide. Source separation offers another path by capturing urine before dilution. Phosphorus cannot be destroyed, only moved or transformed. Excess in water stimulates algal growth, while agriculture depends on phosphate rock. Recovery from sludge, ash, and liquid streams may close part of the loop. Economics improve when avoided maintenance and pollution costs are counted alongside fertilizer sales. Policy decides whether those broader benefits are visible. Advanced treatment, combining membranes, activated carbon, oxidation, and disinfection produces high-quality reclaimed water. Orange County in California, Singapore's Nuatur program, and other projects demonstrate different forms of indirect or direct reuse. Each operates within a specific regulatory and hydrological context. Public trust grows through demonstrated performance, independent oversight, and honest discussion of failures. Failures will occur. A pump stops. A main bursts. An operator makes an error. Rain exceeds design. Or a household blocks a pipe. Resilient systems detect trouble early, contain it, communicate openly, and learn. Reliability is not the absence of every fault. It is the capacity to respond without abandoning the most vulnerable. Redundancy supports that capacity. Treatment plants use backup power. Parallel units, spare pumps, bypass storage, and laboratory checks. Small systems can store replacement parts, train more than one caretaker, and arrange mutual support. A single heroic operator should not be the only person who knows how a chlorinator works. Institutions must preserve knowledge through turnover. Maintenance budgets rarely attract ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Political leaders prefer visible construction. Donors favor new facilities, and households notice a toilet block when it opens. 5 years later, broken locks and full pits reveal whether finance covered operation. Life cycle costing includes cleaning, energy, emptying, repairs, monitoring, and eventual replacement. The cheapest initial design can become the most expensive abandonment. Historical memory can improve planning. Medieval rakers, Edo collectors, Victorian sewer workers, and modern tanker drivers all demonstrate that removal is labor, not magic. Roman drains and Indus channels show that maintenance determines the life of masonry. The Great Stink shows how political attention can arrive only when powerful noses are affected. Colonial segregation warns that technical plans can deepen inequality while claiming neutrality. The Old Night Soil cautions against nostalgia. Returning nutrients to fields conserved value, but collectors and farmers face parasites. Waterborne sewerage protected interiors while polluting rivers. Advanced treatment reduced organic loads while consuming energy and producing sludge. Every arrangement creates trade-offs. The responsible question is not which historical system was pure, but which risks can be reduced without hiding burdens. One revealing moment in the public history of the water closet came with the Great Exhibition in London in 1851. Sanitary engineer George Jennings installed conveniences for visitors at the Crystal Palace. Users paid a small fee and received access to a clean facility with attendant services. Contemporary reports counted hundreds of thousands of uses during the exhibition. The event did not introduce Britain to toilets, but it demonstrated that a well-run public facility could serve a vast and mixed crowd. Jennings later promoted public conveniences and patented improvements, while other manufacturers competed vigorously. Thomas Crapper became a successful late 19th century plumbing entrepreneur whose name is now surrounded by legends. He did not invent the flushing toilet, and the English word crap has a history older than his company. His firm's showrooms, products, and royal warrants nevertheless helped normalize sanitary fittings. The myth reveals a popular desire to attach a complicated transformation to one memorable person. Municipal public toilets often displayed elaborate ironwork, glazed tiles, polished wood, attendance rooms, and underground entrances. These materials were chosen for durability and an atmosphere of order. Underground construction saved street space, but introduced stairs that excluded many disabled and older users. Ventilation and drainage demanded constant attention. Surviving Victorian conveniences are admired as heritage, yet preservation should not freeze their original inequalities. Sewer form also carried accumulated experience. Egg-shaped brick sewers were narrower at the bottom than at the crown, concentrating low dry weather flow so that it moved fast enough to carry solids while still providing capacity during storms. Circular pipes became common with standardized manufacture. Manholes allowed inspection at changes in direction and grade. Inverted siphons carried flow beneath obstacles, though they required careful flushing because low points collected sediment. Gravity was preferred because it did not need power, but terrain seldom cooperated perfectly. Pumping stations lifted sewage when a city crossed a valley or lay on flat ground. 19th century beam engines gave way to electric pumps and automated controls. Check valves prevented reverse flow. Screens protected machinery, and emergency storage allowed time during outages. A humble float switch could be as important as a monumental tunnel. Engineers calculate a sewer's expected flow, slope, roughness, depth, and cleansing velocity. Oversizing feels prudent but may slow ordinary flow until solids settle. Undersizing produces backups. Population forecasts, industrial demand, infiltration, and stormwater assumptions shape the result for generations. Climate change and urban growth now make old calculations uncertain. Rehabilitation may line an existing pipe from inside, reducing excavation but slightly narrowing its diameter. House connections are frequent points of failure. Tree roots enter cracks, pipes sag, joints separate. In many cities, owners are responsible for the lateral between a building and the public main. A low-income household can face an unaffordable repair even when the municipal sewer is functioning. Insurance, assistance programs, and clear responsibility prevent a technical boundary from becoming a trap. Plumbing codes emerged partly from repeated disaster. Cross-connections allowed contaminated water to enter drinking supplies. Unvented traps lost seals. Lead, wood, clay, cast iron, copper, concrete, and plastics each offered advantages and hazards. Lead was durable and easy to shape, which is reflected in the word plumbing from the Latin plum, but its toxicity made widespread use dangerous. Modern materials still require correct joining and support. Backflow prevention protects clean water when pressure drops or a hose sits in contaminated liquid. An air gap is a simple physical separation. Mechanical devices serve other situations and need testing. A hospital, laboratory, irrigation system, and domestic toilet present different hazards. The invisible pressure change during a main break can reverse the expected direction of flow, reminding us that networks do not always move one way. Rural sanitation campaigns in the 20th century United States linked privy improvement with campaigns against hookworm, especially in the South. The Rockefeller Sanitary Commission, active from 1909 to 1914, promoted treatment, education, and sanitary privies. Its work contributed resources and attention, but it also reflected paternalistic assumptions and could understate poverty, labor conditions, and public responsibility. Shoes, treatment, and feces containment all mattered to hookworm control. During the New Deal, programs including the Works Progress Administration constructed sanitary privies in many rural communities. Standard designs used concrete slabs, screened vents, and protected pits. Local materials and labor made rapid expansion possible. A standard plan offered improvement over an exposed pit, but could not solve unsuitable groundwater or future maintenance. Public investment reached places unlikely to finance sewers, though racial and regional inequality remained. In many countries after the Second World War, modernization policy equated progress with waterborne sewerage. Large dams, treatment works, and concrete networks attracted international loans. Central systems delivered major benefits where institutions could operate them. Elsewhere, expensive plants ran below capacity because households could not afford connections, pumps lacked electricity, or spare parts were unavailable. An unused plant does not treat the wastewater passing beside it. The appropriate technology movement responded by emphasizing lower cost, locally maintainable options. The ventilated improved pit latrine developed through work in southern Africa and elsewhere, drawing on earlier vented designs and entomological understanding. Engineers tested pipe color, orientation, and fly behavior. The word appropriate did not mean primitive. It meant fitted to resources and service conditions. Poor communities still deserved high-quality design. In India, Sulabhath International, founded by Bindeshwar Pathak in 1970, promoted twin-pit pour-flush toilets in public complexes while campaigning against manual scavenging. Twin leach pits can alternate so that contents in one rest before removal. The organization created a widely known museum and service model. Its contributions should be considered alongside the long work of Dalit activists, labor organizations, governments, and other sanitation groups. No institution alone ended degrading practices. Community-led total sanitation emerged in Bangladesh around 2000 through work associated with Kamal Kar and development organizations. Rather than subsidizing a standard household latrine, facilitators encourage communities to analyze pathways of fecal contamination and organize to end open defecation. The approach spread internationally. Its strongest versions mobilized collective action. Its worst versions crossed into shaming or coercion. Later adaptations placed greater emphasis on inclusion, quality, and sustainability. Sanitation programs often discover that the last households are not simply late adopters. They may include tenants, very poor families, nomadic groups, people with disabilities, isolated older adults, or residents on flood-prone land. A campaign that celebrates open defecation-free status can pressure officials to overlook them. Independent verification and follow-up after several seasons are more meaningful than a signboard on the day of declaration. Behavior change is not a substitute for infrastructure. Hand-washing messages cannot produce water. Appeals to clean a shared toilet cannot resolve a landlord's refusal to repair its pit. At the same time, hardware unused or misused offers little benefit. The false division between software and hardware disappears when programs treat people as partners who need both reliable services and understandable information. South Africa's post-apartheid constitution and water policies made access to services part of a broader transformation, yet the inherited spatial inequality was enormous. Municipalities expanded sanitation through sewers, Latrines, and other systems. Service protests, informal settlement growth, maintenance failures, and debates over minimum standards continued. The bucket system became a potent symbol because manual collection in segregated townships had embodied racial humiliation. The Equine municipality, which includes Durban, adopted large-scale urine-diverting dry toilets in some peri-urban areas beyond the Sayed core. The program responded to water scarcity, terrain, and rapid settlement. It generated valuable research on user acceptance, maintenance, and nutrient recovery. Some households appreciated the service, others wanted waterborne connections or struggled with emptying. Technology selected at city scale still had to make sense inside each home. Brazil's condominial sewerage offers another adaptation. Developed from the 1980s, the approach uses shallower, smaller diameter pipes laid through groups of properties or along accessible routes, with residents involved in deciding alignment and responsibilities. Shorter networks can lower cost and reach dense neighborhoods. Success depends on consultation, maintenance agreements, and connection quality. It is not merely a cheaper pipe, but a different institutional relationship. Pakistan's Orangi pilot project in Karachi supported residents in building lane-level sewers while advocating the government provide larger trunk infrastructure and treatment. Beginning in the 1980s, local mapping, technical guidance, and household finance demonstrated community capacity. The model did not excuse the state from its role. It distinguished internal neighborhood work from external systems that required public authority. Sewage still needed a safe endpoint. In Indonesia, simplified sewers, communal septic systems, and neighborhood treatment plants have been used alongside larger networks. Dense settlements may lack space for conventional alignments. Small decentralized plants shorten transport, but multiply the number of sites needing operators. A central utility concentrates expertise. Distributed treatment can adapt locally, but risks neglect if responsibilities and fees remain vague. Japan's modern sanitation transition combined sewer construction with continued night soil collection. Rapid post-war urbanization produced large quantities from vault toilets, even as flush connections expanded. Specialized treatment plants process collected night soil. This hybrid history contradicts the idea that a country moves directly from buckets to sewers. Old and new systems overlap for decades, and successful management bridges them. Japan also developed high-feature household toilets with heated seats, washing jets, deodorization, and controls. These devices grew from bidet seat technology and domestic electronics rather than from one sudden invention. They can improve comfort and cleansing, especially for some disabled or older users. Complex controls, electricity, repair, and unfamiliar symbols create barriers for others. Luxury at the seat does not change the destination of wastewater. The global spread of pedestal-sitting toilets has sometimes displaced squatting designs. Squat toilets avoid seat contact and may suit customary posture, clothing, and cleaning practices. Pedestal models assist some users but hinder others. Accessible design often requires a seated option, while public facilities can provide both. Declaring one posture. Civilized confuses cultural preference with health evidence. Defecation posture influences the angle of the anorectal canal, and squatting or foot support may reduce straining for some people. Commercial claims often exaggerate the certainty or universality of benefit. Individual mobility, pain, balance, and medical conditions vary. A safe handhold and stable surface are more important than prescribing one ideal position to everybody. Odor has shaped toilet design from incense and ash to traps, fans, and chemical additives. Smell warns of maintenance problems and affects dignity, but an odorless space is not necessarily pathogen-free. Conversely, a well-managed composting toilet may have little odor without flushing. Public perception can determine whether people use a facility, making ventilation a practical rather than cosmetic concern. Flies respond to light, odor, moisture, and access. Covering a pit opening, fitting screens, cleaning fecal smears, and maintaining ventilation reduce breeding and movement. Insecticides provide limited help if structural access remains. Rats exploit broken drains and food waste. Sewer control therefore intersects with solid waste management. The toilet cannot compensate for an open garbage pile beside it. Hand-washing design deserves equal attention. A tap positioned too far from the exit allows people to skip it, while a basin without drainage creates mud. Soap may be stolen if supplies are unreliable, prompting secured dispensers of soapy water solutions. Alcohol hand rub is useful in many health contexts, but does not replace soap and water when hands are visibly soiled, and is not equally effective against every pathogen. Drying matters because wet hands transfer microbes more readily than properly dried ones. Paper towels, cloth rollers, and electric dryers involve different maintenance, waste, energy, and accessibility considerations. The evidence comparing methods depends on conditions and study design. What matters most is that a functioning option is present and users have enough time. Toilet cleaning chemicals enter wastewater. Strong disinfectants are valuable in outbreaks in clinical settings, but routine overuse can harm treatment microbes, corrode surfaces, and expose cleaners. More fragrance is not more sanitation. Procurement should consider worker health and the capacity of the receiving system. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed public toilet contradictions. People were told to wash hands while many facilities closed. Essential outdoor workers and people without homes lost access. Managers feared surface transmission before evidence clarified that airborne spread dominated. Improved ventilation, cleaning, and occupancy management were reasonable. Blanket closure shifted bodily needs into less safe places. Pandemic recovery strengthened interest in touchless fixtures and occupancy data. These technologies can help, but they also collect information and require maintenance. A foot-operated door or well-designed handle may be simpler. Innovation should be judged by user experience, accessibility, and life cycle cost, not by whether it contains a sensor. Tourism places seasonal pressure on small systems. A coastal town may have a winter population of thousands and a summer load many times larger. Treatment plants must handle peaks without remaining inefficiently oversized all year. Cruise ships and campgrounds add concentrated flows. Visitors rarely see the utility planning beneath a pleasant destination. Festivals and large events rely on portable toilets, hand-washing stations, service vehicles, and traffic plans. The portable unit stores waste in a chemical-treated tank. It does not treat it. Contractors estimate use. Place units on level accessible ground, and empty them at legal facilities. Too few units create queues and open urination. Accessible units must be available in meaningful numbers and kept from becoming storage closets. Sports stadiums illustrate fixture ratios. A short half-time interval produces intense demand. Older venues built predominantly for male spectators often provided inadequate facilities for women as audiences changed. Renovation can convert space, add all gender options, and improve circulation. Queue measurement offers evidence more useful than equal door counts. Religious pilgrimage can create one of the world's most demanding temporary sanitation tasks. Millions may gather within a limited area, requiring toilets, water, cleaning, crowd control, and rapid waste removal. Designers account for ritual practices and clothing as well as volume. Heat increases dehydration and odor. The service must recover between waves of users without blocking movement. Remote parks and wilderness sites face a different balance. A simple pit may work where use is low and soil appropriate. Alpine, desert, cave, and polar environments decompose waste slowly, making pack-out systems or sealed vaults preferable. Visitors who assume nature absorbs everything can overwhelm a fragile site. Managers select technology according to carrying capacity rather than urban expectations. Mountaineering routes on heavily visited peaks have accumulated human waste in snow and rock. Cold preserves rather than treats it. Some parks require climbers to carry waste in approved bags or use collection barrels. Helicopter removal is costly and weather-dependent. The problem is a modern form of density appearing in a landscape that seems empty. Antarctic research stations manage sewage under international environmental rules and extreme conditions. Frozen ground prevents ordinary pits. Treatment units face cold, isolation, and limited spare parts. Coastal discharge policies have changed as technology and standards developed. Researchers studying pristine ecosystems must also account for their own bodies. Archaeologists of the future may recognize our sanitation through plastics, pharmaceuticals, pied networks, treatment residues, and altered nitrogen cycles. They may see a civilization capable of removing nutrients from wastewater while mining and manufacturing fertilizer elsewhere. They may also find remarkable declines in disease where services became universal. The record will hold contradiction, as every earlier record does. At home, the small rituals continue. A person closes a door, uses water or paper, washes hands, and leaves. Someone refills soap, clears a trap, reads a meter, tests effluent, repairs a pump, or guides a tanker to a receiving station. These acts belong to one service even when institutions divide them. Respect begins by seeing the connection. Imagine tracing a single flush beneath a city. It descends a soil stack, passes a vented branch, and joins flow from neighbors. In an older district, rain may enter the same conduit. A pump lifts the combined water over ridge. Screens remove wipes and plastic. Grit settles. Microbes consume dissolved matter in an aeration basin. Solids sink, some return, and the rest moves toward digestion. Disinfected effluent enters a river. Sludge follows another path. Every stage can be measured, maintained, or neglected. Now imagine a dry toilet in a settlement beyond any sewer. Urine drains to a sealed vessel. A trained collector exchanges the container on schedule and takes it to a treatment hub. Heat and time reduce pathogens. Nutrients return to agriculture under controlled conditions. The chain looks different but answers the same questions: separation, collection, treatment, worker protection, and safe return. Neither picture guarantees justice. The sewered household may be wealthy, while its outfall harms a fishing community. The dry system may be imposed on poor residents, while a nearby luxury district receives abundant water. Technology must be evaluated together with voice, finance, land, and power. Equal dignity can allow diverse systems, but it cannot accept a lower standard of safety for people with less influence. By 2024, the world had made substantial gains in safely managed sanitation, yet billions remained outside the full service. The number is immense, but it consists of individual mornings: a child avoiding a school cubicle, a worker waiting for darkness, a driver searching for an open restroom, an emptier entering a pit without equipment, a resident watching floodwater rise around a latrine. Statistics become useful when they direct attention to those experiences rather than covering them. The unfinished task is not simply to install more bowls. It is to protect drinking water, make public space accessible, end degrading labor, recover resources wisely, prepare for climate extremes, and keep services working after headlines fade. It requires engineering, public finance, law, medicine, ecology, design, and daily care. Above all, it requires listening to users and workers who encounter the quiet sound behind the wall. Water waits because a reservoir, watershed, utility, and household have made it available. The pipe carries waste because someone surveyed a gradient and someone else will clear the blockage. The treatment plant works because operators tend living processes through the night. The simplicity at the surface is an achievement of interdependence. For most of human history, people could not make excreta disappear with one motion. And in truth, no one can do so today. We can only move it into another form and another place. Safety comes from following that movement honestly. Dignity comes from ensuring that nobody is forced to absorb the hidden cost. The history of the toilet ends not with a perfect invention, but with a continuing promise to care for the entire chain.